Here's the joke that took Hollywood 3 years to land on accident, the censors caught, and then the show used anyway. Half an inch to the side. The fictional Native American tribe at the heart of F Troop was originally going to be called the Fugawi, as in, where the heck are we? The network censors caught it, flagged it, and forced a change. The writers didn't scrap the joke, they just respelled it, the Hakawi. Same punchline, different letters. Nobody at ABC's Standards and Practices department seems to have noticed the second time. That's the spirit of F Troop in a single anecdote. A show that got away with more than anyone expected, on a budget that was tighter than anyone admitted, starring a cast of character actors who turned out to have far more depth than the slapstick required, that lasted only 2 seasons on network television and then somehow became one of the most beloved cult comedies of its era in syndicated reruns. Today, 15 facts about F Troop, the original series, its legacy, its cast, and its strange afterlife. One of these facts involves a 16-year-old who lied about her age to land the female lead. Another involves a studio decision so financially baffling it canceled one of the network's most reliable performers. And the one we close on is about what the show was actually doing underneath all the pratfalls. Let's count it down. 15. The captain's promotion came from the wrong direction. Literally.
Sergeant, time for me to take command.
The entire premise of F Troop rests on one of the most efficiently absurd setups in 1960s television comedy, and it's worth walking through it carefully because the show never slows down to fully explain it. Wilton Parmenter is a private in the final days of the Civil War. During the climactic moments of a battle, he sneezes. The sneeze causes him to stumble forward at exactly the wrong, or depending on how you look at it, exactly the right moment, which his horse interprets as a charge command. Parmenter accidentally leads his unit directly into the enemy, and through pure chance, the Confederate forces interpret the unintentional charge as a sign of overwhelming Union confidence and surrender. Parmenter becomes a war hero. The Army, having no idea that the entire episode was an accident triggered by a sneeze, promotes him to captain and gives him command of his own post, Fort Courage, Kansas, a remote and largely irrelevant outpost that functions, by the unspoken logic of every military organization in fiction, as a dumping ground for men nobody else wanted. This is the entire structural engine of the show. Every week, Parmenter is in command of men who know things he doesn't, navigating a world of schemes and shady business dealings he's too naive to fully perceive, succeeding anyway through a combination of luck, decency, and the genuine loyalty of people who have decided to protect him from his own innocence. The Army never finds out the truth. Neither, for most of the show's run, does Parmenter himself fully understand how he got there. The joke renews itself every single episode. A man who has no idea he isn't actually competent, surrounded by people who know exactly how incompetent he is and have decided, out of something like affection, to let him keep believing otherwise. 14. Forrest Tucker had actually served in the cavalry.
Blow assembly.
There is a layer of irony buried in the casting of F Troop that most viewers never noticed, and it concerns the actor playing the show's most dishonest character, Sergeant Morgan O'Rourke, the schemer at the center of the fort's illegal business operations, the man running souvenir sales and liquor distribution through a secret arrangement with the local Native American tribe, was played by Forrest Tucker. Tucker had genuine military credentials that predated his acting career. He had actually served in the United States Cavalry before World War II. The role required Tucker to play a character whose entire comic identity was built around using his military position for personal enrichment, a man who saw the Army not as an institution to serve, but as infrastructure to exploit. The character's competence was real. His honesty was not. O'Rourke was, in the structure of the show, essentially the Sergeant Bilko of his era, a direct descendant of the conniving, charismatic, fundamentally corrupt, non-commissioned officer archetype that had become a reliable comic engine in American military comedy. What makes this particularly layered is that Tucker had also previously played a different cavalry sergeant named O'Rourke on the television series Gunsmoke, a small, specific echo that connected his F Troop role to an earlier, straighter performance in the same uniform, on a different network, in a different register entirely, an actual cavalry veteran playing a fictional cavalry sergeant whose entire comedic purpose was demonstrating exactly how far an institution can be exploited from the inside by someone who understands its rules better than the people running it. Tucker brought a specific physical authority to O'Rourke that came from having actually worn the uniform for real. The comedy needed someone who could be believably competent underneath the corruption. Tucker had earned that believability the hard way, years before the cameras started rolling. 13. The female lead lied about her age to get the part.
Wilton, I can't believe it. We're going to be married in 3 months.
No.
Melody Patterson auditioned for the role of Wrangler Jane Angelica Thrift, the local shopkeeper and postmaster whose primary narrative function across the series' first season was pursuing Captain Parmenter toward marriage with persistent, good-natured determination, without expecting to be cast. She was 15 years old at the time of her audition. By the time filming began, she had turned 16. The role called for a young woman whose romantic pursuit of a grown man in a position of military authority needed to read as charming rather than uncomfortable. And the production, by all accounts, was not fully aware of how young their female lead actually was when the casting decision was made. Patterson reportedly lied about her age to secure the role. The deception held long enough for her to be cast, and by the time anyone might have raised serious concerns about the age gap between her and Ken Berry, who played Parmenter, the show was already in production. This detail has a direct and documented effect on the show's first season. Television historians and critics examining the series have noted that the deliberately one-sided, slow-burning nature of the Parmenter-Jane relationship in Season 1, Parmenter's persistent evasiveness, his reluctance to fully reciprocate Jane's affection, reflected genuine institutional discomfort once the production became fully aware of the real age difference involved. The chemistry between the characters was written to stay safely at arm's length for a meaningful stretch of the show's run, a choice that reads differently once you understand the production context behind it. It's a piece of television history that complicates a show otherwise remembered as gentle, silly, and entirely harmless. A reminder that the casting practices of 1960s network television operated under considerably less scrutiny than would be acceptable today. 12. Larry Storch played 5 of his own cousins.
A cannon? Wild Eagle wants us to give him our cannon?
Corporal Randolph Agarn, played by Larry Storch, was O'Rourke's sidekick and business partner. The slightly dimmer, considerably more excitable half of the fort's illegal enterprise operation. Storch brought an improvisational, almost vaudevillian energy to the role, drawing on years of stand-up and nightclub performance experience that predated his television career. One specific skill Storch possessed became a recurring structural device for the show. He was exceptionally good with accents. The writers noticed and began exploiting it directly. Across multiple episodes, Storch was cast not just as Agarn, but as a series of Agarn's supposed long-lost relatives, cousins who would appear in individual episodes, each performed by Storch in a completely different accent and persona. There was a Mexican bandit cousin in the episode El Diabolo. There was a French-Canadian cousin. There was a Russian cousin. Each one was a fully committed, distinct comic performance, all delivered by the same actor playing variations on a single bloodline. This wasn't an isolated gimmick. It became something the show returned to repeatedly because it worked and because Storch had genuine range that the writers were eager to use. The device, referred to in television criticism as double vision, appeared no fewer than 5 times across the show's run, with Forrest Tucker and Ken Berry each getting at least one episode where they too played opposite themselves. Tucker as O'Rourke's father, Berry as Parmenter's identical stranger double. Larry Storch lived to 99 years old. By his manager's account, he never regretted being best known for F Troop. He embraced it, his manager said after Storch's death. He loved being Agarn. 11. The show was built entirely on the Warner Brothers backlot.
Agarn, you tell O'Rourke that I ain't never gonna speak to him either.
I'd love to, but I ain't speak.
Fort Courage, Kansas, the dusty, sun-bleached frontier outpost where the entire series takes place, was never a real location in Kansas or anywhere else outside of Southern California. The entire series was shot on the Warner Brothers backlot in Burbank, using standing Western sets that had been built and rebuilt across decades of the studio's film and television productions. This was standard practice for Western-themed television in the 1960s. Building elaborate location shoots into a weekly comedy budget was simply not financially realistic. But it also meant that the production was constrained to a specific, repeatable visual environment. The same streets, the same buildings, the same general topography appearing week after week, dressed and redressed to suggest variety that the underlying geography couldn't actually provide. What's notable is how much creative mileage the show extracted from that constraint. The relationship between Fort Courage and the surrounding Hakawi territory, the saloon, the trading post, all of it had to be conveyed through blocking, dialogue, and production design rather than through genuine geographic variety. The show's writers and directors became skilled at making a limited physical space feel like a complete, functioning frontier ecosystem. This same backlot reality would later become directly relevant to the show's cancellation, because the amount of Warner Ranch real estate the production was occupying turned out to be a significant factor in the decision to end the series, which is where this story gets considerably more interesting. If this kind of real television history, the constraints, the decisions, the people behind the characters, is what you're looking for, subscribe. We do this every week. 10. The show was canceled, not for ratings, but for real estate.
Well, I'm just going to have to do it.
Wait a minute, Wilton.
This is one of the more genuinely strange cancellation stories in American television history because it has almost nothing to do with audience response. By the end of its second season, F Troop's ratings were, by any reasonable measure, healthy. The show ranked 40th out of 113 programs for the 1966 to 1967 season with a 31.3 share, numbers that reflected a solid, dependable audience rather than a struggling production on the verge of audience abandonment. It was canceled anyway. According to Forrest Tucker's own account, the decision came from Warner Brothers' new ownership group, 7 Arts, who had recently taken control of the studio and were reassessing how the company's physical resources were being allocated. Their conclusion, as Tucker understood it, was that the amount of Warner Ranch backlot space being occupied by a single half-hour comedy was simply not an efficient use of studio real estate, regardless of the show's ratings performance. Producer William Orr offered a related but distinct explanation. The studio was also unhappy with the increased production costs of filming the show in color during its second season, after the first season had been shot more economically in black and white. A healthy, popular show, killed by a balance sheet rather than a ratings report. Cancellation decisions rarely come down to what audiences actually want. 9. The Hakawi tribe's name was a censorship workaround.
Bandit who robs banks, stagecoaches, gold trains, and who has a $10,000 reward on his head.
We opened with this fact, but it deserves the full telling, because the story behind it reveals something specific about how 1960s network comedy operated under broadcast standards that were simultaneously rigid and strangely permeable. The fictional Hakawi tribe, Fort Courage's neighbors, business partners in the fort's various illegal enterprises, and a recurring comic presence throughout the series, needed a name. The writer's original choice was the Fugawi tribe, built around an origin story in which the tribe, having wandered for generations searching for a new home, eventually stopped and asked each other, "Where the heck are we?" The joke depended entirely on the phonetic resemblance between Fugawi and the question itself. Network censors caught the joke and rejected the name before it could air. The writers didn't abandon the bit, they simply respelled it. Hakawi instead of Fugawi, the same phonetic joke, technically distinct enough on paper to pass the same scrutiny, that had caught the original version. The tribe's origin story remained essentially unchanged. In the show's mythology, Chief Wild Eagle explains that the tribe had traveled west, over rivers and mountains, before falling over a cliff, at which point the tribe's medicine man reportedly said, "I think we lost. Where the heck are we?" And the name stuck. This kind of joke, getting flagged, surviving through cosmetic alteration, and then airing essentially unchanged in spirit if not in spelling, was a recurring feature of how 1960s television comedy operated within the constraints of network standards departments. The joke that got caught usually wasn't actually eliminated, it was just disguised well enough to slip through a second time. 8. The show used Yiddish comedy traditions to build its indigenous characters. This is one of the more complicated and historically interesting aspects of F Troop's production, and it requires being discussed with the nuance it deserves. The Hakawi characters in F Troop, led by Chief Wild Eagle, played by Frank Dakova, were written and performed with a comic sensibility that drew heavily on Yiddish theatrical and comedic traditions. Many of the actors and writers involved in crafting the Hakawi characters were veterans of Yiddish comedy and Borscht Belt entertainment, and the specific rhythms of the Hakawi dialogue, the cadence, the deadpan delivery of absurd business logic, the comic timing built around understatement, reflected that background directly. This produced a strange and specific hybrid. Fictional Native American characters whose comic voice was, in practice, constructed from an entirely different cultural comedic tradition layered on top of broad Western genre stereotypes. The Hakawi were depicted as shrewd businessmen running a profitable trade enterprise with the fort, selling souvenirs, operating a still, negotiating terms with the canny self-interest of people who understood exactly how the system worked and exploited it accordingly. The show was, by the standards of its time, relatively gentle in its treatment of these characters compared to much of the era's Western television. The Hakawi were never depicted as savage, were consistently shown as more competent and more financially astute than the soldiers nominally stationed to guard against them, and frequently delivered the show's sharpest lines. But the underlying construction, non-native actors and writers, drawing on a separate ethnic comedic tradition to build characters representing a different and specific cultural identity, is exactly the kind of choice that later television criticism would scrutinize directly, and the show is generally discussed today with that complexity acknowledged rather than ignored. 7. The fort's headcount didn't add up, on purpose.
Clark! Gilbert and Sullivan! Get ready for a double-time march! Now! It's gonna be once around!
One of F Troop's more quietly clever running jokes involves simple arithmetic that the show never fully resolves and was never meant to. According to the show's internal logic, Fort Courage drew rations and pay for 30 men. Only 17 soldiers are ever actually shown or accounted for on screen. The explanation, when one is offered at all, comes from O'Rourke. The remaining 13 are supposedly Indian scouts who only come to the fort at night and leave before dawn, conveniently never appearing for inspection or roll call. The joke does double duty. On its surface, it's a simple bit of absurdist arithmetic. A fort whose numbers don't match its visible population, explained away with a story specific enough to sound plausible and vague enough to never require verification. But it also quietly reveals the entire economic engine the show is built around. O'Rourke is skimming the pay of 13 soldiers who don't exist, funneling that money into the operation of O'Rourke Enterprises, and nobody in the actual chain of command above Fort Courage has ever bothered to check. It's a small, persistent detail, never the focus of any single episode, never explained in full, simply existing in the background as confirmation that the fort's entire economy runs on a fiction that everyone involved has agreed not to examine too closely. That's a more sophisticated piece of comic world building than the show's reputation as broad slapstick generally gets credit for. 6. Captain Parmenter was played by a trained dancer.
Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet. You take that, Captain?
Ken Barry, who played the perpetually bumbling Captain Wilton Parmenter, brought a specific physical skill set to the role that audiences rarely consciously registered, but that shaped every pratfall and stumble the character performed across 2 seasons. Barry had extensive dance training and had come up through talent shows and Las Vegas performance circuits before landing in television. This background mattered directly to how Parmenter's physical comedy worked. The character's defining trait was clumsiness, tripping, falling, fumbling through every situation with a kind of perpetual, gentle disaster. Executing that kind of comedy convincingly, week after week, without it reading as repetitive or careless, actually requires considerable physical control and precision. A genuinely clumsy performer produces clumsy comedy. A trained dancer performing clumsiness produces something that looks accidental but is actually exact. Barry's specific physical command allowed Parmenter's pratfalls to land with consistent comic timing rather than chaotic randomness. The character's stumbles needed to feel inevitable and yet still surprising, a contradiction that is much easier to engineer with real physical training underneath the performance than without it. Barry went on, after F Troop, to a long career that included Disney films like Herbie Rides Again and The Cat from Outer Space, along with extensive work alongside Carol Burnett. His specific gift, physical comedy executed with a dancer's precision, remained a defining feature of his work for decades after Fort Courage closed its gates. 5. The show brought in an astonishing roster of guest stars.
Remember Paul Revere! Remember Patrick Henry! They not make...
For a two-season comedy that many casual viewers remember primarily as a lighthearted Western spoof, F Troop assembled a genuinely remarkable roster of guest performers across its run, a list that reflects how seriously the production was taken within the industry, even if its network tenure was relatively brief. The guest cast across the show's 65 episodes included Vincent Price, Ziza Gabor, Don Rickles, Jamie Farr, Phil Harris, Milton Berle, Harvey Korman, Mary Wicks, Pat Harrington Jr., Julie Newmar, Paul Lind, Sterling Holloway, Paul Peterson, Lee Merriweather, Jack Elam, Abby Lane, and Bernard Fox. This is not the guest roster of a marginal show. This is the guest roster of a production that major performers wanted to appear on, that casting directors were able to fill with genuine star power on a consistent basis. Don Rickles appeared as Bald Eagle in one of the series' earliest episodes, a piece of casting that, in retrospect, reflects exactly the kind of Borscht Belt comic sensibility the show was drawing on throughout its run, deployed directly rather than just stylistically. The willingness of performers at this level to appear in guest roles on a two-season ABC sitcom says something specific about how the show was perceived within the industry at the time, not as a marginal production scraping for credibility, but as a genuinely well-regarded comedy that attracted serious talent, even in supporting capacities. 4. The show's cult following outlasted its network, run by decades. F Troop aired for exactly 2 seasons and 65 episodes before its cancellation in April 1967. By the conventional metrics of television longevity, that's a short run. A show that came and went within a relatively narrow window of the decade, overshadowed by longer-running contemporaries. What happened next tells a different story. F Troop entered syndication and found an audience that, in some respects, exceeded what it had achieved during its original broadcast. The show became a genuine cult favorite in reruns, developing a devoted fan base across decades of television viewers who encountered it not on its original ABC broadcast, but through endless syndicated repetition on local stations. Fans of the show, by multiple accounts collected across television retrospectives and fan commentary written decades after the original broadcast, could recite entire episodes from memory. The specific rhythms of O'Rourke and Agarn's schemes, Chief Wild Eagle's deadpan deliveries, Parmenter's earnest cluelessness, having absorbed the show through repeated childhood viewing rather than appointment television. This pattern, short network run, enduring syndication legacy, is one that F Troop shares with several other genuinely beloved 1960s comedies that were canceled despite reasonable ratings, only to find their truest and most lasting audience in the decade's reruns that followed. The show that Seven Arts decided wasn't worth the backlot space it occupied ended up occupying a permanent place in the memory of American television audiences who never saw a single original broadcast. 3. The cast stayed connected for the rest of their lives.
Hey, Clark, let's do this thing right. Let's walk right into the bank singing a proper song.
Unlike many television ensembles whose on-screen chemistry dissolves the moment production wraps, the core cast of F Troop maintained genuine connections to each other and to the show itself for decades after cancellation. Larry Storch's manager, speaking after the actor's death at 99, specifically noted that Storch relished working with his co-stars and never expressed regret about being permanently associated with the role of Agarn. This is a meaningful detail in an industry where actors frequently express ambivalence or outright resentment about being defined by a single early career role for the rest of their working lives. Melody Patterson maintained an active connection to her F Troop legacy well into her later years, including running a personal website dedicated to the show and her experience on it. A detail that reflects genuine ongoing affection for the production rather than a desire to distance herself from a role she'd been cast in as a teenager who'd misrepresented her age to get the part. The surviving cast members, Barry, Storch, James Hampton, and Patterson among them, remained recognizable and discussed figures in classic television fandom circles for decades, frequently appearing at conventions and retrospective events dedicated specifically to F Troop's legacy. This kind of sustained mutual affection between a cast and the production that defined their early careers is genuinely less common than nostalgia tends to suggest. The show that lasted 2 seasons created bonds that, for several of the people involved, lasted the rest of their lives. 2. The show played fast and loose with history and never apologized for it.
That's a sweet thing to do, Sarge. Ah, you darn me, boy. There'll be other bandits for another...
F Troop's relationship with historical accuracy was, by design, almost entirely absent. The show was explicitly satirical rather than educational, freely parodying real historical figures, events, and conventions of the Western genre for comic effect without any pretense of documentary seriousness. This was not a limitation the show worked around. It was the entire premise. The series operated on the understanding that audiences in 1965 had already absorbed decades of Western mythology through film and television, and that the comedy worked precisely because viewers recognized exactly which conventions were being inverted, exaggerated, or punctured. Parmenter's accidental heroism satirized the entire genre tradition of the competent, deliberate frontier hero. O'Rourke's corruption satirized the assumption that military authority equals moral authority. The Hakawi's business savvy satirized the genre's standard depiction of native characters as either threats or noble obstacles, rather than people operating with their own economic self-interest. The show never apologized for its historical looseness because it was never trying to be history. It was trying to be a specific kind of joke about how Americans had been telling themselves stories about the frontier for decades, and how absurd those stories looked when you pushed their internal logic just slightly further than intended. That specific brand of genre satire, gentle, affectionate, but genuinely critical underneath the slapstick, was harder to execute well than it looked, and F Troop's sustained cult popularity suggests the show generally got the balance right. 1. What F Troop was actually doing underneath the pratfalls.
Him very old Eastern boy, come from good family in Ohio. Doc.
And here is the thing that sits beneath all the tripping, the schemes, the mock battles, and the souvenir sales. F Troop premiered in September 1965. The Western genre, by that point, had dominated American television and film for the better part of 2 decades. A sustained national mythology about frontier expansion, military authority, and the clean moral lines between civilization and wilderness. That mythology had real cultural weight. It shaped how generations of Americans understood their own history. F Troop took that entire structure and quietly, persistently, gently dismantled it every single week. The fort's commanding officer is in charge through pure accident and remains ignorant of his own incompetence for the show's entire run. The senior non-commissioned officer is running an illegal business operation through the institution he's supposedly serving. The fort's headcount is fraudulent, padded with imaginary scouts whose pay funds a smuggling ring. The enemy tribe is not a threat at all. They're business partners, shrewder and more capable than the soldiers nominally guarding against them, staging mock battles purely for the benefit of outside observers who need to believe the frontier mythology is real. Nothing in F Troop's universe is what the official story says it is. Every institution depicted in the show is built on a foundation of mutually agreed upon fiction that everyone inside the system understands and nobody outside it ever questions. And the show's argument, delivered through pratfalls and mock battles rather than direct statement, is that this might actually be a more honest description of how institutions generally function than the clean, competent, morally certain version the Western genre had been selling audiences for 20 years. That's a genuinely subversive thing to be doing on ABC in 1965, dressed up as a show about a man who fell off a horse and became a hero by accident. The frontier wasn't tamed by competent heroes making clear moral choices. It was held together, in F Troop's specific and very funny telling, by people who had figured out the system was fake and decided the kindest thing to do was keep the fiction running for everyone's benefit. That's not just a joke, that's an argument. And 60 years later, it still lands. 15 facts, 1 fort, and a question worth settling in the comments. Is F Troop's satire of the Western genre still funny today? Or does the show's treatment of indigenous characters complicate how comfortably modern audiences can enjoy it? There's no easy answer, and I'm genuinely curious where you land. Subscribe for more of this. We'll be back next week.